What's up, everybody? Welcome back for another episode of Fantasy Hockey here. Last one, we gave you guys 10 undervalued players to go try to target. Today, we're going to give you 10 players who we feel are overvalued and you should probably avoid and find someone else. Just a disclaimer here quickly, none of these guys are bad hockey players. There's no hate whatsoever on any of these guys. It's purely based upon fantasy hockey and where they're going in drafts. And first off here, I'm going to start with Freddie Andersen of the Carolina Hurricanes, currently going around average pick of 80 right now. For me, this is just way too high. I know Carolina is a very good hockey team. I mean, we just saw them make the Final Four last year. But when it comes to the goaltending, Andersen kind of worries me. This is a guy now who has dealt with injuries for the last couple years. But on top of that, he has some other competition. This is not a guy who has the whole net to himself. We've seen Antti Ranta take over, and now Pyotr Kochetkov has really taken off lately in the past 2 years. I think he's going to eat into a lot of this time. And I think if you're drafting a guy like Freddie Andersen as high as 80th average pick, that's probably going to be like round 7 or round 6, depending on how many people are in your league. I think you're going to regret it because I don't think this guy's going to play more than like 45 games.
Yeah, I agree 100%. Freddie Andersen has not been playing full seasons for a while now. He has a history of getting injured quite often. He didn't play a full season the last 2 seasons, I don't believe. So he hasn't been, and when he played, he hasn't been that great. So yeah, Freddie Andersen was great when he was in Toronto. That's the last time where I thought he was actually very, very good. But now things are changing in Carolina. They have a young goaltender who is, in my opinion, better than Freddie Andersen at this point.
Yeah, last year statistically, Freddie Andersen definitely had a down year, and I don't know if it's really going to climb. I think that Kochetkov is the future of this team, and I think it's sooner rather than later. And personally, I wouldn't want to make a risk with that high of a draft pick.
And the next pick that we have is Ryan Nugent-Hopkins from the Edmonton Oilers with an ADP of 32. Now, I think this is way too high for this player. Now, I understand that a lot of Oilers fans are going to get mad that I put this player because this guy had 100 points and he had 35 goals. I mean, great. But the thing is, he was playing on power play 1 for most of it. And I know he's still on that unit. But keep in mind, I think Edmonton also kind of overexceeded on the power play last year. And I don't expect them to have that record-breaking best ever power play again. I expect them to be the best in the league in terms of power play, but not in that production again. And that's going to hurt Ryan Nugent-Hopkins' production for sure. And there's a lot of better players, in my opinion, in that area, like Kyle Connor, and I think Stamkos is better, and there's just better players in there.
Once again, this is another example of a player who is pretty good hockey player, but it's more just based on where he's going. When you're going 32nd overall average pick right now, this is a guy who for like the last 5 years was nowhere near these point totals of last year. Last year was a complete outlier for his career. He's in his late 20s now. You don't really project that type of a season. Like, I think it might have been up there with one of the more surprising things that happened last season, 100 points for a guy like Nuge. This is a guy who gets like 65, 60 points most years. And like Cohen said, their power play was the best in history, like number 1 ever. Automatically, that in my mind has got to come down. Do I still think Edmonton's going to have the best power play in the league? Absolutely. But I think he's going to lose some points there. And like Cohen said, there's other guys you can target around there. Guys like Kyle Connor, who you know you're going to get 80 points and 35 goals. Pretty safe bets. And Steven Stamkos, same type of thing. It seems too risky to rely on an outlier year like Nuge had last year. Next up here, I got for you guys is Carter Verhaeghe, going average pick about 55 right now. Carter Verhaeghe had an insane year last year. He was so good. I mean, this guy scored 42 goals, had over 70 points. I mean, absolute breakout career year. Not to hate on the guy in any way, because I was really impressed, but this is just too high. There is so many players in this range when you're in the mid-50s that are just consistently talented every single year, and you know for sure what you're going to get from them. There's guys around here like Barkov, Nico Hischier, guys like Clayton Keller, like best player on his team. Like, these are guys that I would much rather have here than Carter Verhaeghe. Personally, in my mind, I think Florida's going to fall down a bit from last year. Usually teams that make it to the Cup final and lose historically have not been quite the same the next year. And this team is dealing with a lot of injuries, and I think that is going to affect Carter Verhaeghe's production offensively.
Absolutely. This team has a lot of mileage in the past season, playing that many playoff games as well. Carter Verhaeghe had over 70 points in the regular season last year, which is highly impressive. But the year before, when Florida Panthers broke the record for having the most wins in that season, remember that? He only had 55 points. So it just shows me that this player cannot. Last year was an outlier season for this player. And I just don't see him replicating that 70-some point season again, especially for this season, especially when the Florida Panthers, to me, is not that strong of a hockey team.
Yeah, for me, it comes down to safety. If you guys are going to do a draft, when you're in your first 5 or 6 rounds of the draft, you got to hit those picks. Those guys have to be really solid. Like, you cannot miss, because that'll really affect your team going forward. You can take risks when you get later down into like round 12, 13, but you really got to crush rounds like 1 through 8. And I think it's just too risky to rely on a guy who just had a career year there when there's just better options of safer players.
And the next player that we have is also Florida Panthers, and it's Sergei Bobrovsky, average pick of 75. Now, I think that is way too high for this goalie. No offense. This goalie was good. I mean, he was good last year in the playoffs. Don't get me wrong. One of the better goalies in the playoffs last year. However, I think, like we said about Carter Verhaeghe there, we don't think Florida Panthers are going to be that good of a hockey team this season. They're going to drop off a little bit. They're going to have a little bit of a setback. They've had a lot of mileage this past season, a lot of wear and tear on their bodies. You know what? I think with other goalies in this range, you can have Thatcher Demko, you can have Korpisalo, a lot of proven goalies, Vitek Vanacek. You know, like, there's just better goalies in this range, and I think it's just way too high.
Yeah, for me, Bobrovsky is a little past his prime. It was amazing what he did last year in the playoffs for the couple rounds where he was like going to be a Conn Smythe favorite for a bit, until obviously the final when Vegas was scoring like 9 goals against him there. But this is a guy who we have to remember, last year in the regular season, he was not very good. He was kind of losing his job near the end of the year. He was not very effective. And in the first round of the playoffs, he wasn't even the starting goalie for this team. Spencer Knight is back from his rehab there. He is probably going to dip into this. He was supposed to be the future goalie for this team, and he is incredible talent. Like, Spencer Knight has a lot of potential, and he's at that age where goalies start to mature and start to take over a bit more. And I can definitely see Florida starting to go to splitting these games a little more evenly. I don't think you're going to see Bobrovsky playing 60, 65 games. And I think with the average pick like he's going right now, I think they're expecting him to play about like 55, 60 games. And I just don't see that happening. So I just think it's a little too much. Next up for you guys, I got Jared McCann from the Seattle Kraken, going average pick around 86 right now. Now, Jared McCann last year was fantastic. One of the biggest surprises for me of the year. This guy came out and scored 40 goals for the Kraken, and this team was awesome. They made the playoffs in their first year. This guy, career year. I just don't see him being able to replicate this. I just think that as good of a player as he is, I don't think he's an elite player. And usually the players that are scoring 40 goals in and out, they're like the top tier echelon goal scorers of the NHL. We're talking guys like Pasta, Matthews. These are the guys who get 40 goals consistently. I fully expect him to go down to like 30 goals or 28 goals this year. Pretty big drop off. And I mean, most of McCann's value is going to be because of scoring goals. So I think going that high in the draft right now, I think there's other options that you could go for that are going to be more reliable veterans. Guys like Jonathan Huberdeau are going around that range. Andrei Kuzmenko, even though he's not a real veteran, playing with Elias Pettersson, we saw how good he did in his first year. I think that could even be better this year. And I just don't know if I want really a piece of that Seattle offense right now, because this is a good hockey team, but they do it with everyone's effort. This isn't just a one-line team. Seattle's a very deep team that uses 4 lines. So I don't know really about Jared McCann this year.
Yeah, I agree. Jared McCann, I think he overachieved. I think Seattle Kraken as a franchise overachieved last year. I definitely see this franchise taking a step back this season. I see a huge improvement from Calgary and Vancouver this upcoming season. I think these teams are going to take the Pacific Division make it very, very competitive for the Seattle Kraken. Seattle Kraken, like Scott alluded to, they have a lot of players that scores. It won't just be Jared McCann. One night it could be Burakovsky, one night it could be Eli Tobin, and one night it could be Oliver Bjorkstrand. You just don't know who's going to score. So the thing is, I know he had a very, very good season, 40 goals, 70-some points, great. But I just don't see him replicating this again. And the next player that we have on the list is Brent Burns from the Carolina Hurricanes. Now, I love his mustache. Don't get me wrong. He had a terrific season last year, having over 60 points for the Carolina Hurricanes in his first year, which is amazing. However, he is also like 38, 39 years old. He is getting up there in age. And on top of that, this summer, they brought in Tony DeAngelo to maybe quarterback that power play. So we don't know for sure that Brent Burns is going to get power play 1 for the whole year. That's a big problem here, because the most important thing about with the defense position in fantasy hockey is whether you're going to play power play 1. And in this case, I don't have a clear clear answer that he will play power play 1 for the whole season, and I don't think he will. And there's other players in this range, such as John Carlson, Moritz Seider, and are, to me, are just much better defensemen.
Yeah, no, I have to agree. Brett Burns is an all-time great. He's going to be a first ballot Hall of Famer. This guy's career is absolutely legendary. I mean, this guy's won a Norris Trophy, just absolutely unreal talent. But the guy is 38 years old now. And I'm not saying when you get older you can't play hockey, because obviously last year we watched this guy put up 61 points and he was incredible. But like Cohen said, there's more mouths now. They brought in Orlov and they brought in Tony DeAngelo. And I don't know if you guys remember, the last time Tony DeAngelo was on this team, he was the power play quarterback. And he did pretty much almost the same type of numbers, just a little bit less. And he's a lot younger than Brett Burns. When you bring in a guy like Tony DeAngelo, you have to realize this guy's not a very good defender. You're bringing him in for a reason, to provide more offense from the back end. Because you already got studs like Slavin there. You got studs like Brady Shea. Like, this is a very good defense, right? So probably he's going to take into some of that power play work. And if he does that, Brett Burns is not going to get 60 points again. You're looking at maybe 45, 50 points tops. And I mean, if you're drafting around that range, like Cohen said, there's just other guys. Like we saw Sergachev in his absolute prime in his mid-20s last year, absolutely light it up. He's around that range. John Carlson, little younger than Brett Burns, still the power play quarterback for Washington. You can go get him. And I just think it's a lot safer for you guys. Next up, I got another goalie for you guys that just feels way too high, and that's going to be Jeremy Swayman from the Boston Bruins. Average pick right now across the leagues at 54. This is kind of crazy to me. I know it's a lot based upon how well Boston did last year with their record-setting year. Both Omark and him are very high ranked, but I mean, this is a pair of goalies who is likely going to split a lot of these starts. You're looking at probably like a 45-30 type split kind of thing, like for the 82 games. And I really hate for fantasy to have goalies that split. I want a workhorse in that range, especially in the mid 50s. That's crazy to me. You can get goalies that are way better that are going to play like 60 games later in this draft in like average pick of like 80 to 90. Guys like Jari, guys like Demko, Korpisalo, guys on really good teams as well that could actually win like 30, 35 games and have probably pretty close numbers, maybe slightly worse save percentage than goals against. And I just rather go get those guys way later than pay up and get a guy like Swayman.
Yeah, especially when you're drafting that early 55 picks. That is way too early for a player that might not even start most of the workload. It could be Olmark is still starting, who won the Vezina last year. You know what I mean? Like, the most important thing about goalies, in my opinion, is that yes, they can get wins, but at the same time, they need to start to get those wins, right?
Yeah.
And if he's not getting those starts, I don't know how you're going to get those wins. So yeah, I think he's just way too high. It's just there's not much more to say. And the next player that we have is Tyson Barrie from the Nashville Predators, average pick at 109. Now, it blew my mind when I saw this player being average pick this high. I mean, this player, I know he had a good year when he played for the Oilers, the number one best power play. He had like 40-some points on our team, on the Oilers, before he moved on to Nashville. Ever since he got moved on to Nashville, he didn't have those production again. No. And on top of that, he's playing behind arguably one of the best defensemen in the league in Roman Josi, who's going to get all the points in the world for the team from the defense side. So, yeah, Tyson Barrie is going to play power play too, and he's just not going to replicate that.
Yeah, I really don't see any upside with this pick for Tyson Barrie here. This is a guy for his whole career has been known as kind of the guy who's not really the great defensively, but puts up a lot of offense. And I just don't see it happening with this team. Nashville, in my opinion, is going to be like a bottom 8 team in scoring this year. I don't think we're going to see that team score a lot of goals. And when they're on the power play, we know it's going to be Roman Josi. And if it isn't, that would be absolutely wild to me. This guy has been one of the best offensive defensemen in hockey for like the last 6-7 years. Absolutely elite of elite. I mean, we've seen this guy win a Norris. We've seen this guy put up almost 100 points as a defenseman. It's going to be Josi there. Barrie's not going to have a lot of opportunities minus the power play too. And really, let's be honest, the power play 2, you only get about 40 seconds out of every power play. The other unit's going to be on there for the majority. And he's going to be playing with a lot of young players on that Nashville team that don't have a lot of NHL experience. So this guy's probably going to be a minus player if you have plus minus in your league. He doesn't really add a lot for peripherals either with hits and blocks. So really, it's just such a low floor for this player. Next up, I have Martin Necas from the Carolina Hurricanes. Martin Necas last year really impressed me for a lot of the year. This guy came out of the gate really strong. This guy for the first like 45, 50 games was a point per game player. He was unreal. Near the end of the year though, he did fall off, and in the playoffs we really saw more of a fall off again. When I look at the Carolina team, this is a really, really good team. Like, I mean, they're always going to be good. I expect them to be a top 3 team in that division again, but they do it through like not allowing a lot of goals, playing good defense, and really they don't score a lot of goals. And if they do, they spread it out through 3 or 4 lines. And Martin Necas is not a guy who you can rely on to always be this top line, high scoring player. We see him moved around that lineup a lot. One night he'll be on the first line, then the second line, maybe even the third line sometimes. You don't know if he's going to necessarily be on the power play all the time on the power play 1. And I think his production, we saw it fall off near the end of the year in the last 25 games a lot. Like he went from a point per game player to in the last 25 games, I think he had like 14 points in the last 25. It's just too high for a top 100 average pick player. Around this range, you can get guys like Kuzmenko, you can get Huberdeau, a guy who's had over 100 points before, and you know these guys are going to be more solid. They're safer picks there, and I just wouldn't want to go with Necas there.
Yeah, I remember when this guy last year, this guy had the hottest start. He was incredible in that first 30 games. He dropped off so hard in the last part of the regular season, and that's the part we want these players to perform at the best. You got to crush it to get into the playoffs or during the playoffs. You want these type of production when they put up like these massive point totals, and he just wasn't providing that during those periods. And you know what? I've seen Martin Necas in the playoffs where he just fades. Like he's not an X factor. And like Scott said, a lot of players can score on this team. One night it could be Svechnikov, one night it could be Seth Jarvis. You just don't know who's gonna score, and it's never gonna be just Martin Necas who's the go-to guy. There's other players that can do that. And the final player that we have on the list is Hampus Lindholm from the Boston Bruins, average pick at 115. Now, this player also, like Martin Necas, had a very hot start to the season, but that was because Charlie McAvoy was out during that time, and he was on the power play 1. Now, he is not. Now that Charlie McAvoy is playing to start the season, he's not going to be on power play 1, and he's just not going to have that production. And remember, in the playoffs, he had 0 points. Let me emphasize that again. He had 0 points in the playoffs. It's absolutely embarrassing. Like I said, you want these defensemen in the first power play unit. We saw his production absolutely dropped off last season when McAvoy came back significantly, and it's gonna happen again. He's not the go-to guy.
Yeah, it was quite evident when we saw the last 25, 30 regular season games. And then once again in the playoffs, last time we saw him, he looked pretty bad offensively. Not a guy you really want to have in fantasy, especially at that kind of a high pick, relatively. Like, this guy is still going in the top 10 rounds right now. There's far better defensemen I'd rather go get there. I'd rather go get a guy like Shabbat, who I know is consistent. He hits, he blocks. He's going to get you at worst 45 points. Guys like Morgan Riley, who are going to be like most likely a 45, 50 point player for Toronto. These guys are also going that range, and you know that they're like going to be the guy that's playing like 25, 27 minutes a night, and they're going to be putting up some good numbers offensively. It's just really hard to get there for me with Lindholm. I mean, I was really impressed. He had a really solid defensive year too. Like, he was a great actual hockey player, no hate whatsoever. But this Boston team is not going to score as much. They've lost a lot, and if they're not going to score as much, that negates a lot of chances for secondary assists for this guy, and he's not going to be the power play guy very likely. And if he is, it's going to be for like 20 games out of the 82, because they got Charlie there, and he is like the number 1 by a landslide. But guys, that concludes our video. Let us know in the comments below what you disagreed with, what you agreed with, and if you enjoyed this video, feel free to like and subscribe, and we'll see you later. Take care and have a great day.
Take care, guys. Bye.